Welcome to part 2 of the MaxiGrow versus the MaxiBloom in growing nasturtiums. This is part 2, so if you haven't seen part 1, please watch that video first. That is tied with this experiment, and it is all one experiment, essentially. But before I start this experiment, I was actually going to be starting the seeds off here, and I came across something that I didn't realize, and it might be a good tip or at least helpful for anybody else if it works out the way that I think it will. So I was pouring these seeds out in my hand, and I was starting to, rough up the surfaces. So you can use sandpaper. In this case, I'm just using a file. And in some seeds, this is very helpful. If you take the seed and then you rough up or scuff up the outside, so it allows it to absorb more moisture. There's a lot of reasons that it actually is helpful, but it doesn't really matter. It just works. I actually did that with growing a lemon seed. And what I'm getting at is inside a lemon seed is the actual seed. So this is just the husk or the shell of it, more or less. At least I'm pretty sure with these seeds that's what it is. So basically what I was doing is I was going to rough it up, and I had noticed that it was loose. So what I did is I just basically just squeezed it a little bit. This one here is a little bit more difficult because it's, it looks like it's in better condition. The other one I squeezed wasn't. It just kind of fell apart. But nonetheless, the inside of it contained something that was the actual seed, or what I believe to be. So I didn't take it all the way out. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but you can see inside there, I believe that is the actual seed, and the outside part is just basically the husk. It's kind of soft, but the inside part here, this is the hard part. So in this experiment, what I'm actually going to do is over here I have my 2 containers where I'm going to put the seeds in, and I'll put a set amount in each, probably 9 in each, which is I think what I did in part 1. But in one of them, I'm going to plant the dehusked seed, and in the other one, I'm going to plant the ones that are just left alone. I'll still scuff them up both equally, and we'll see if we get more germination in one or the other. This will be kind of like an experiment within the experiment. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll get off to the next part of this video. All right, it's been a week since I planted these seeds, and you can see that they have sprouted. You can also see I have a time-lapse camera set up here. This is a new time-lapse camera I'm currently doing a review for, but I will include the clip for these seedlings here in this video. You can see that I was pretty much right on the money when it comes to the germination rates, and container right there on the left, that's the one where I dehusked the seeds, and the one on the right is the one where I just left it, well, I just left the husk on. Only 1 seed sprouted in that one, and all 9 seeds sprouted here in the one where I removed the husks, so that's pretty neat. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next part of this video. I'm gonna go ahead and remove these from the soil and get them in hydroponic setups, and then we'll come back and take a look at everything. All right, I chose 4 similar seedlings for this experiment, and I'm doing something a little different than the first episode, which is part 1 of this experiment. I'm using these 10-gallon totes, and I've used these for several videos in the past. The last part of this video, or I should say part 1, I used 4 different containers. This part I'm just going to be using 2 here. As of right now, both of these are both filled up with a solution of the MaxiGrow only. And then we are going to be switching over to the MaxiBloom on just one side, probably the right side here, and then continue using the MaxiGrow on the other side. I got about 9 gallons of solution in each one of these containers, and I only used 10 grams for those 9 gallons. So we're starting out with a very light solution to begin with, and then when these start to grow and then I have to do a nutrient change out, I will increase that probably to 5 grams per gallon and maybe up to 10 grams per gallon. Probably not, because these plants don't seem to be very nutrient hungry. So we're gonna go ahead and let these grow for a while. We'll come back and then we'll see what happens. All right, it's been 3.5 weeks, and here's where we're at with the plant growth. It is now time to change out the solutions to continue giving the plants on the left the MaxiGrow, and to only give the plants on the right the MaxiBloom going forward. I just want to reiterate, just in case I haven't mentioned this already, this coloration of the leaves, that's completely normal. That's the way they're supposed to look. That's not a deficiency. Also, it turns out that I really like using this styrofoam on top of these containers. This makes things a lot easier. And one thing mainly is just the fact that since these plants don't grow upright, they're a vining plant, when they fall over, they have something just to kind of lay on instead of falling over to the side of the container. Looks like I'm gonna have to add a separator in between here to kind of separate these plants so they don't vine together, and it'll make it easier to observe later on. But other than that, I'm gonna be pumping out the solutions, changing it out today, and then we're going to come back and see what happens. All right, I got the solutions all changed out here. The MaxiGrow is still on the left and the MaxiBloom is now on the right. There is 3 gallons in each container at about 5 grams per gallon concentration. Instead of putting a divider here, I actually just rotated the plants so they were leaning towards the outside on each side. It just seemed like it was easier to do it that way. And I made sure the par levels were pretty much identical on both sides there, which is around 350 micromole each on the plant tops. I also increased the light intensity. I raised it up a little bit, increasing intensity to give me a more even coverage. And just so people know, the dial is right there. It's just a little bit above 50% brightness. Let me just go ahead and lock the intensity level on the camera here. And then if I turn it up, you can see how much brighter it actually gets there. So I have actually never had to run this at full power yet. There's plenty of light running it at 50% at that height, which is about 18 inches or so off the board there. So we're gonna let these grow and we'll come back when something changes. All right, it's been about a week and a half since the last segment of this video, and since I switched the plants over here on the right to the MaxiBloom and kept using the MaxiGrow with the plants on the left, I just wanted to show the plant size and plant growth and the roots here, which I'll show in a second. So far, since I changed out the solutions on both of them, even though I'm using the MaxiBloom on the right plants here, and they have half the amount of nitrogen that they did before, both of these, or all 4 of these plants, seem to be growing at very similar rates still, even though these have half the amount of nitrogen on the right. The plants on the left here are slightly larger. They are starting to grow a little bit larger than the plants here on the right, which I would have expected. There's still no buds or flowers starting on any of the plants that I've noticed. I've taken a close look, and I didn't see any just yet. Looks like to me the plants on the left, as you would expect with more nitrogen, are maybe slightly greener than the plants here on the right. That's all to be expected. The roots here I wanted to show also really quick. I haven't shown these in the video yet. I don't think I have anyways. So what I did here is I dropped the water level down in these containers. Before it was filled up pretty close to the bottom of the net pots, and most of the roots were submersed in the water. And there was a few roots on top, getting the air that they needed. But with the plants being young and having shorter root systems, it needed to be a higher water level. Well, since these roots have actually grown quite a bit and elongated, I dropped the water level down, so now it's only about quarter filled. So all the roots hanging down now, as you can tell, are now growing air roots. So these plants are now getting more oxygen into the root systems. You can see it kind of looks furry. Those are the air roots. And this kind of is why it took a little while for these plants to acclimate after I did the nutrient change out. And they kind of sat stagnant for a little while after that. And then I'd say about halfway through, so I'd say just a little under a week, they started to grow more. And at this point, they're starting to accelerate in their growth now that their roots are acclimated and they've grown their air roots. It's one of the downsides to Kratky. If there's not enough roots exposed to the air, they don't really grow quite as well. It's just easier this way for me doing the Kratky method because it's a more stable solution for comparisons. If I was growing a single plant and not really doing any kind of comparison experiments, I would probably be doing some sort of aeroponics or aerating the solution to make the plant grow better and faster. In this case, I'm not really strapped for time, so it doesn't matter. So anyways, that's the update here. I just wanted to show what was going on. And then I think what we'll do is we'll come back once one of these starts to flower or maybe bud, and then we'll take a look and talk about a few things at that point. All right, it's only been another week, and you can probably tell why I'm making another update here. These plants here in the past 2 or 3 days have just had an explosion in growth. Mainly the plants here on the left that are growing in the MaxiGrow, the ones with twice the amount of nitrogen anyways. The ones on the right here, the MaxiBloom, they have only grown a little bit more, not a whole lot, but you can tell that these plants here have shifted over to this side. So these on the left side are almost twice as big now as the ones on the right side that are growing in the MaxiBloom. What's interesting, and the other reason why I wanted to make an update here, is because this is not happening as I would have expected it to. And by that I mean in the MaxiGrow side, these plants are already starting to get buds on them. there's quite a few actually. So I can look at a couple different places, buds there, they're all over the place. This is the exact opposite of what's supposed to happen, because on the MaxiBloom side, if you look closely, you're not going to be able to look closely, but I've looked closely already, and there is not hardly, or there's not any buds that I have seen. You can see here, if you look closely, you can see that there's new stems growing with new leaves, but there's no actual flower buds yet. And I find that kind of interesting, and the only thing I can think of that I can attribute that to is maybe two things. One is the fact that by changing the nutrients so abruptly, it could have put the plants into some sort of shock. Now, if you're changing something on a plant that's about to flower, you could definitely inhibit it from flowering by just giving it too much or too little nutrients. So that could be the reason why that's not showing any buds yet, because they're both, these plants here, in a state of shock. They probably will eventually flower, but it's just kind of weird because the last video I did where I was growing these, where I grew them all in one nutrient through the entire growth, the ones that were growing in the MaxiGrow side, they would not flower, they wouldn't even produce any buds. And now they're just producing buds all over the place. So I'm gonna let this go longer, obviously, and we're gonna see what happens here. But I just wanted to comment on that really quick to kind of show that, because I found that pretty interesting. All right, it's been about 4 more days, and the plants over here on the MaxiGrow side have already started to flower, and the plants here on the MaxiBloom side are just starting to show signs of producing some buds. So there is plenty of flowers being produced here over the MaxiGrow side. There's a lot of buds. There's actually quite a few. They're all over the place. There's a couple flowers, and then probably in the next coming days here, probably in the next 4 days, you see all those buds there all over the place. And that's kind of what that looks like in there. So in a matter of a couple more days here, we're going to see a ton of flowers open up. Over here on the MaxiBloom side, there is little teeny tiny buds. There's one there. And there's a couple more up there. Very sparse. There's not a lot. This plant here up front, you can see there's one right there. There's not a lot there yet. So these here are way behind. But we'll let it go a little while longer, and we'll see if maybe the ones in the MaxiBloom here maybe produce more flowers. All right, it has been another week since the last segment of this video, and today marks the 2-month marker since I've started this experiment. So these are 40-day to maturity plants, so I've taken it far beyond that. And you can see here that the ones on the MaxiGrow side are still growing quite a bit. They're even coming up the back side of this and trying to take over the MaxiBloom side there. Plenty of flowers here on the MaxiGrow side. You can see I have the little things down there to show you which one is which. And one thing I've noticed here that I didn't see in the last experiment was the red flowers. So there's actually a red flower right here. It's actually more like an orangey red, kind of hard to see on the video. But most of the flowers are these really vibrant yellow-orange flowers. These are really a cool color. And then the other one back here, which is more of a red color, you can see it right there, and there's another one sprouting out there. There's still quite a few buds all over here. There's quite a bit of flowers that have kind of bloomed and then kind of wilted, to where on the MaxiBloom side over here, I mean, there's some buds on here, but there really isn't anything opening yet even. So over here, there's a bud right there. You can see that. There's certainly not an abundance of buds, and I'm giving these both the same solution. So in other words, right now I have reduced the amount of nutrients I've been giving these plants in particular, since these they seem to be affected by too much nitrogen. So if there's too much nitrogen, they don't seem to want to bud and flower. So what I did is I reduced the amount of amount of powder by weight. So this side here is getting 10 grams per 3 gallons of water. So that's just a little bit less than it would normally be for what it says to use. And I'm doing the same thing over here with the MaxiBloom, the exact same amount. Now, if I haven't mentioned already yet, because there's a lot of segments of this video, but just so you know, these two different nutrients, these two powders here, the only difference between them is simply the amount of nitrogen is cut in half over the MaxiBloom, and then this number right here says 5, and that's 15. There's 3 times the amount of that. Those are the only differences. All of the other stuff, all of the other things in here, if you look on the back, all of the other small things, I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see them right there in percentages. They're basically identical between those. It's just the NPK that's the only difference. So really, this is kind of a little bit different than the last video did, I guess part 1 of this particular experiment, where the MaxiBloom flowered and the MaxiGrow didn't. However, I didn't grow them as long. So I would assume that if I had let them grow longer, that we would have seen a similar result to what we're seeing here. So I just wanted to show that. It's pretty interesting. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to let this experiment go, because as of right now, what this is telling me is that there really is no need to use MaxiBloom at all. Whether I start with it or switch to it after the plants grow through their vegetative stage, in all my experiments so far, whether it's being a flowering plant or a plant that produces produce, the MaxiGrow is really all that you need. Now I could see possibly mixing these together and averaging them out for a more general purpose, but really it seems to me that the plants really benefit from more nitrogen in almost any plant that I've grown with using the MaxiGrow. Now obviously this is the same company here. This is just 2 different products from the same company. They're meant for other things. So there are certain plants in a situation where you're growing a different kind of plant that you could probably benefit from using the MaxiBloom by switching it over after using the MaxiGrow. For the average person who's growing regular plants like these, and you're not growing other types of plants that you probably, maybe you know what I'm talking about, the MaxiGrow here seems to work just fine all by itself, and there's no stressing on the plant when you do the switch over. So as you can see, there's plenty of flowers here, but I'll let this experiment go a little bit longer, and maybe I'll wait and see once we start getting some flowers in the MaxiBloom. All right, it's been another week and a half since the last segment of this video, which makes it about 2 months and a week and a half since the start of this experiment. And you can see here that the MaxiGrow side, lots of dense foliage and lots of blooms going on, and a lot more of these red-orange flowers, especially up front here. You can see quite a few of them. Over on the MaxiBloom side, it's the same story as it's always been. Not much foliage going on. Pretty much that's halted for the most part. You can even see that there's they're even getting less nitrogen, as you would expect. And we're just starting to see some blooms here open up finally on the MaxiBloom side. Mostly red ones. There's one yellow one up there, and there's not a lot of them. And really, from what I'm seeing on this side over here, between the plant in the front and the plant in the back there, I mean, there's flowers opening up, but as far as the buds go, where you can see where they're going to start opening up new flowers, if you look closely, you see a couple like right there. And there's a few more places that they're pretty much, I'd say pretty much all of the little tips over here, the tips of the vines, kind of look like that. There's not a whole lot going on down like inside of the plant, which is normal. I'm just pointing that out. But in the back there, those leaves, it's kind of interesting that those leaves over there in the back are, it's almost like it's a different plant. They're more green. I was thinking this was maybe just coming over from the other side over here, but it is actually from the plant back there. And then these leaves over here from this front plant, but they're all in the same solution. This is all the same bin. You can see in there. So, I mean, as of right now, you know, just looking at all the little buds and blooms in here on the MaxiBloom side, it's pretty much the same story on the MaxiGrow side. Look at all the buds all along here, and you can see them all over every single one of these vines. There's buds all over the place and blooms all over the place. It doesn't seem to be inhibiting the growth of the flowers by having the more nitrogen in the MaxiGrow solution. And you can see they're just all over the place. And I don't see, if anything, I even see less buds over here in the MaxiBloom side. So this right here is kind of telling me that there really is no need to use MaxiBloom, as I've said before earlier in this video. The MaxiGrow by itself seems to be just fine all by itself through the entire grow, a very good general purpose. Like I said before, there might be some other reasons you might want to switch over to MaxiBloom during a blooming phase of certain plants, but in most cases, when you're not growing those type of plants, for just general purpose growing, this is working very well. And I mean, the plants are healthier, they're larger. I just don't see any reason to use the MaxiBloom, whether it's to switch over or to grow through the whole thing, which I've proven already in several different videos. And I think right now, I mean, at this point, I would pretty much end this experiment here. I have all the information I need from what I've observed, except for the part 1 of this video series, where it was interesting that the MaxiGrow side was, even though they were larger plants, they weren't really producing the blooms, and the MaxiBloom side was, except actually it was only one plant that was doing it. So that's not entirely conclusive, and they were smaller. The same as what you see here with the MaxiBloom plants. So, like I said before, if I would have let it go longer, I probably would have seen a different story, because I let this experiment go almost twice as long as the last experiment already, which is almost double the days to maturity of these plants. So I think I'm ending this experiment here, but there's going to be another video here, which I know everybody has been asking about, and I find it to be sort of pointless, but I'm going to do it anyways, just for the sake of doing it, which is kind of what I do on this channel a lot anyways. It's just for the sake of doing it. So I'm going to take the MaxiBloom and the MaxiGrow, and I'm going to combine them together to make a more general purpose type of solution. So I'll have one side growing in the MaxiGrow, and then one side with the MaxiBloom and MaxiGrow combined together. All it does is it averages out the contents in there. It's not additive. So if anything, it's just going to be less nitrogen and maybe some other stuff. I'm going to go over that in that video, though. I'm not going to talk about that here. So I want to thank everyone for watching up to this point. I think the results here are pretty conclusive. This experiment ran way further along than it was supposed to go, or at least initially intended. And because of that, I wasn't able to get the video put out when I wanted it to. So hope you enjoyed that. We'll see you next time.